Welcome back. All right, so I want to start off talking about the Dallas Stars in terms of teams I'm going to discuss today. Dallas is in an interesting spot right now. They've been a dark horse team for years, right? They get to the Stanley Cup final in 2020. They missed the playoffs the year after. It's been really an up and down time. The one thing I want to see from Dallas this year is wins in overtime and shootouts. That is 14 points they squandered, and they finished 1 point out of finishing tied for first, 2 points out of outright having first in their division. And I think there's good reason to think they should be first this year. I don't know that Colorado right now looks as good on paper as Dallas does. I think Dallas is, when you look at the whole odds of winning a Stanley Cup, I think Dallas is being underestimated. So there you go, some optimism about Dallas. Now, the exits off the team, Colin Miller traded away. They have a good, solid, deep blue line. Domi left. As a rental, I thought Domi was okay, but I was fine with the team not keeping him around. Glendening, I'll miss Glendening. I liked him as a bottom six guy. He works hard, and the hard workers I do appreciate. But Glendening, there just wasn't room for him. Studenic left. They didn't qualify him. He signed elsewhere. Believe it was in Seattle, right? Riley Tufte as well. That saga is done. Tufte moves on from the Dallas organization. I wish him the best. But for Dallas now, it really is about trying to win a Stanley Cup. So when you look at the numbers this year, they were quite good. They were 7th in goals for. They were 3rd in goals against. When they brought in Pete DeBoer, that was my theory, was this was a team that couldn't score, and they should be able to score. They were 21st in goals scored the previous season. They were 13th in goals against. So the fact that they're 7th in one and 3rd in the other tells you they're a contender. Now, they gave Vegas a hard time of it at points, but you could tell Vegas was the better team. The reality, though, is that Dallas looks like they could very well win a cup soon. Maybe 2024, we see a Stanley Cup in Dallas for the first time in 25 years. So again, conference finalists this year, finalists in 2020. We'll see what they do for an encore in 2024. Now, when you look at this team, it starts with Jason Robertson, right? Robertson, 46 goals, 53 assists, 109 points, and really should be a 50-goal scorer. He's got all the talent in the world. I think the experience in the playoffs will be very beneficial to him, as well as to Roope Hintz. Roope Hintz, fantastic, absolutely dynamic top-line center. And then you've got Pavelski, who has been playing like he's 10 years younger than he is, in part because they put him with Robertson and Hintz. It clearly is a trio that is one of the best lines in the league. And then you get into behind him what's going to happen. Now, Jamie Benn, and the way that playoff series ended, of course, a lot of heat on Ben, and understandable. And I agree. I agree there should be a lot of heat on Jamie Benn. But he had a very good regular season this past year. He could have another good regular season this year with Pete DeBoer. And keep in mind that the idea of trading Ben, sure, his contract, it's expensive, it's got term left. So while it might be beneficial to Dallas if they were able to move that contract, the reality is teams are not going to be anxious to pick up that contract. Now, without getting a lot in return. Marchment, I like Marchment. I think Marchment's offense fell off a bit after a hot start. But, I mean, if he's good for 30, 35 points, I think that's decent. Craig Smith joins the team as a free agent. They pick up Sam Steele as a free agent as well. Forgot to put a check mark or a plus sign next to him because he's an addition. And Blumel is there as well, right? Then you look down the middle. There are a lot of centers here, so some of these guys can end up playing on the wing. After Hintz, you've got Johnston and Duchene. I think Duchene ends up probably being the second-line guy. We'll see what happens. Duchene, of course, a cheap addition for this team from Nashville, and that's key. Foxa, good, solid fourth-line center. Anxious to see what he can do this year. Karlstrom had a few games with them last year. Maverick Bork is out there too. Maverick Bork, one of their higher-rated prospects. We'll see if he gets into any games. And, of course, Stankoven. The excitement around Stankoven has been there. And with this team already having a really solid top nine, is he better suited being in the NHL or the AHL? I would think he probably starts the year in the AHL. I'm pretty sure he's old enough for the AHL at this point. And yeah, Stankoven taking his time. But that could be the best way to go about it. I talked in a news video today about Rucker McGroarty and how I agree with McGroarty's idea that until he feels he's ready, he doesn't want to be just thrown into the NHL. And I agree with that with prospects in general. So yeah, Stankoven's an interesting one. They added Reedy Reedy, of course, being brought in for depth in the AHL, and Damiani's there as well. He's played some games with Dallas over the years, but again, what's ridiculous here is just how many players they have that could end up appearing in games this year. On the right-hand side, behind Pavelski, you got Dodonov. Very good performance by Dodonov when he came over in that trade from Montreal. I expect probably about 15 goals out of him this year. Tyler Seguin, is Seguin going to live up to his contract? No, but again, you can't trade that contract. Seguin settled into a decent role with Dallas, so I'm fine with it. Again, Ben and Seguin cost them, $18.5 million in cap? It's probably best not to think about it. Dellandrea. Dellandrea does ride that line, and I know there's people who don't like Dellandrea and think he's a dirty player, but Dellandrea can be very effective, and if he can find a way to not skirt the rules and really, play a good, solid, and overall disciplined game, I think he could be excellent. And then you got Kamano. Kamano's there as a depth guy, and Bach is there for much the same reason. So I really like the forward depth. I think this is a team that's going to roll 3 scoring lines. Their fourth line should be very good as well. There really is no fault I can find with Dallas's forward lines. Apologies. I know. Sounds weird, doesn't it? But I think what Jim Nill has built here is very good. There's a reason he won GM of the Year this year, and I think this is part of the reason. And then you get to the blue line. Now, Ryan Suter, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not he would get bought out. He did not. There's the second window. They could buy him out. I get the feeling they're not going to. And so, yeah, Suter, in all likelihood, probably starting the year in Dallas. Does he get top minutes? Does he get dropped down? That's where things get interesting, because you got Heiskanen. Heiskanen's the go-to guy. He's absolutely fantastic. No arguments about Heiskanen, I don't think, at this point from people. Lindell, good, solid defensive defenseman. Hakanpää, you get a little more pep from Hakanpää than you might expect. And I mean, like, offensively, there's a little more there than you might think. His numbers don't really show it. But he's useful, and he's a good puck handler at times. And then there's Harley. It feels like Harley reached that next level during the playoffs, and that we started to see why Harley was a first-rounder. I'll be interested to see if that continues, if that progression continues this season. Kind of excited for what Harley might be able to do. I've been hoping for him to get that chance. Lundqvist brought along slowly as well. Of course, they spent a decent first-round pick to pick him up, so we'll see with Lundqvist what ends up happening and whether or not he becomes a regular this year. He should, right? He projects to be in that top 6. Hanley is a useful number 7 guy, ideally. They bring back Bayreuther. Big fan of Bayreuther because, again, the guys who are middling and play some games in the AHL and play in the NHL, the guys who stick with it year after year after year, I really respect them. I really do. So while it's easy to praise the star players, I like to praise the guys that, like Bayreuther, can step in and give you a good shift here and there. And if he ends up being a healthy scratch for a while, he's not going to complain. And then when you throw him back in the lineup, you wouldn't know that he's missed a bunch of time. So I appreciate having those guys around. Derek Pouliot picked up as well. That's an AHL move. They've also got Bixell on the blue line. And then you get to the goaltending. Jake Ottinger is a very good young goaltender. He could move into top 10 status in the NHL. I don't think he's there yet. He did have 31 wins. He did have a .919 save percentage. But in the playoffs, I think it showed he still has some work to do. And despite the fantastic series against Calgary the year before, I think what we saw with Ottinger is probably what you're going to get. You're going to get a good goaltender who may have off nights here and there, and that's just part of being a young goaltender. And so Ottinger's the starter, Wedgwood's the backup. I have no issues at all with the goaltending. Again, the defense is solid, the forward group's really good, and they have other Matt Murray as the number 3 goaltender. I love the confusion that causes. Matt Murray should stay in Toronto just for the fact that at some point we could have at this end is Matt Murray. Now, Matt Murray's coming off of a couple of tough games, so he's looking to bounce back. At the other end, you got Matt Murray. Matt Murray's playing really, really well. It's the Rough Riders all over again. I love that kind of stuff. So anyways, I think Dallas is quite good. I think they're in a good position to contend for a Stanley Cup this year. I think they should be the best team in the Central. Because, again, I look at this forward group. I think it's really, really solid. You look at the additions over the last couple of years, whether it's Marchment, whether it's Duchene, bringing in Dodonov, the fact they've kept Pavelski around, they just make pretty smart moves all around. And, again, Jim Nill deserves a lot of credit, and that's why he was GM of the year. But let me know your thoughts. And, again, if they can turn those overtime and shootout losses into wins, if they can play better 3-on-3 than they have, for the last, 3 years I've talked about it, they can get that going. They could hit 115, 120 points maybe win a President's Trophy, which means no success in the playoffs. But at any rate, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.